church, we are rolling right through the book of Exodus and through the salvation history that we find in it. So far we have seen the Israelites. They've begun their journey of freedom. They've crossed through the banks of the Red Sea. And as you well know that they will spend the next 40 years wandering in the wilderness before they will ever find the banks of the promised land. Now, if you could tell me, what is the one thing that the Israelites were known for doing in the wilderness? Complaining, right? They are known for complaining, and they do that a lot. They started their complaining even before they crossed the Red Sea. And here, they're not very far along in the wilderness before they are at it again. Before they left the Red Sea, in sort of a smart aleck complaint to Moses, they say, "Moses, were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us here to the Red Sea to die?" And here in the wilderness, they say again, "Gosh, only if we would have died in Egypt, where we sat by the potted meat." The potted meat. The translation is the flesh pots of Egypt, which just means this meat that was gathered and distributed by the empire, by Pharaoh, to all those in the empire. But I always hear that as potted meat, and I know that you've got to be real hungry if what you're wanting to eat is spam, potted meat. Now, again, though, when it comes to complaining, I don't want to be too hard on the Israelites and their complaining. That's kind of an easy target, I do think, but because I think there might be something that God honors in complaining. I mean, hear me out, right? Remember, it was Israelites complaining that God heard when they were slaves in Egypt. It was their complaining that started this whole thing, and God heard them. Right? It was the cries of Israel in their slavery in Egypt that wasn't really uttered to anyone in particular, but God hears the cries of the people. Here in the wilderness, God hears their cries again, even though it wasn't really to God they were complaining. They were complaining to Moses and to Aaron. But yet God heard their complaining and then responds with this generous act of mighty provision, holy manna in the morning, the breakfast of champions. There's a place in holy life, I do believe, for complaint when it is real and when it is justified. Right? If the Israelites hadn't complained, where would we be? Think about in our own history here in America, if the African Americans had never complained, where would we be? If women never complained, would they have ever gotten a chance to vote? If coal miners never complained, would we have the labor protection laws that we do today? And to tell a certain people to stop complaining is really to say, know your place and shut your mouth, particularly when it's said by those with too little, said by those with too much. To the contrary, when the complaining is justified, God hears and responds with generosity and provision, and so should we. The issue, again, here isn't really with the Israelites' complaint. It's not in its validity. The problem is the posture in which they're doing it, right? Remember, just as it's impossible to both look back and walk forward for very much long, their posture looks like that, head over shoulder, looking back. If only we were back in Egypt. If only we were kids again. If only it was the weekend again. If only we could go back and do things all over again. See, the posture of complaint when looking back has our sights set on the wrong goals. It misorients our steps in the wrong direction, and it sets us up for failure to see the gift from God that is right in front of us. The Israelites awaken in the morning to see this gift of God that's right before them, right? Let alone the gift of God that is a new day in the wilderness, which is surely better than a new day in slavery. Let alone the gift of God that is a new day in the presence and the promise of God, which is surely better than 1,000 days without. But with this posture of looking back, they fail to recognize the gift that is right before them. What is it? They ask. What do you mean, what is it? It's the thing you've been longing for. It's bread to eat. Granted, it's not the bread that you're used to. It's not the bread of affliction or the bread of your oppressors. It's new bread. It's life-giving bread. It's bread from heaven. It's the bread that only God can provide. But you have to be able to see what's right in front of you. You can't be looking back with a preoccupation with the past. And you surely can't be looking so far into the future with an anxiety of tomorrow. To do so is to ask ridiculous questions like, what is it? In the face of God who is providing for us enough for today. Not too much and not too little, but generously enough for all to make it to tomorrow. And what we're learning as we read here in Exodus from this manna from heaven distribution is that enough means different amounts for differing households based on differing needs. Enough is based on need, but all in all, when God provides our daily bread, God is providing for us enough for all. But this bread, like the bread of heaven that sits upon the table of our Lord, is useless unless it is received with great thanksgiving, broken, and shared with all. Our congregation is beginning our season of stewardship. Here in this congregation for the next few weeks, we'll be hearing from the pulpit and reading in our letters and in our emails lots about giving and lots about sharing. Particularly about giving and sharing financial resources for, one, to build a budget that's worthy of the gospel that we share, and two, to continue our legacy of being and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ from our doorsteps to the ends of the earth. And financial stewardship is essential to being the church of heaven's bread, but it is not all of it. Rather, I think stewardship entails every aspect of our living. It involves all of the good gifts that come from a generous heaven, all of what we have, and all of what we are. Come to us like manna from heaven, from the hand of a good and generous God. Stewardship is about a holy and healthy life. And Exodus reminds us that a holy and healthy life begins in the morning. And it begins with what we eat for breakfast. What's the most important meal of the day? Breakfast. And God, in meeting the Israelites' needs, offers a corrective to the bread of complaining with a balanced diet of the bread of gratitude, holy manna, the breakfast of champions. Spend a day. I encourage you, at some point this week, spend a day and listen and take notice of how much complaining that you hear and that you witness throughout a day, and listen for a corrective. Let me tell you about last Monday morning, right as we were getting ready for the day. And my wife, Alicia, she looks in the mirror and she says, "Oh, man, I don't want to go to work today." I mean, you've been there, right? I know that I have. So I replied to her in, my best preacher voice, a corrective, and I said, there are plenty of people who would love to be able to go to a job today. No, I didn't. Now that is true, right? But I did not say those words to her in that moment because I'm smarter than that, and I really, really like being married to her. But consider, if you would, how differently a day can begin if everything in it is received as gift, and all that is in it wrapped up in gratefulness and gratitude. It changes the tone of a day, and it fills it with deep meaning and lasting hope. And I'm telling us to begin our day in gratitude, but I'm telling us too that we don't have to fake it, right? We can be honest with God in the morning. God, I'm tired. God, I'm weary. But today, oh God, you have given me a purpose and a way to join you, oh God, in holy provision, not only for my family, but for all the families for whom I will encounter today. In gratitude, I take up this work, O God, and commit to seeing it through, so that my work will be your work, and together all your children will be fed by this manna from heaven. Now, Alicia knows that, right? And actually, she practices it very, very well. So much better than I do. Let me tell you about my morning routine. I wake up and the first words out of my mouth are, "Oh no, just 5 more minutes, please. I don't want to get out of bed." My feet hit the floor and I say, "Oh man," as I trudge along into the restroom and I'm murmuring to myself along the way, I'm the only one in this household that doesn't have to be up this early. I don't have to be anywhere at any certain time. Yet it seems that no one else in this house can make it where they need to go on time unless I get up first and I make sure they're up. And once I know everyone's up, then I begin to figure out how we're going to shuffle 2 cars among 5 people, keeping in mind that these 5 people have to be in 4 different places between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., but I also need to consider how everyone needs to be in 5 different places between the hours of 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. It's exhausting, right? Well then, once I figure all that out, I begin to clean because I can't get in the shower yet. I got to do something, so I start cleaning the kitchen and loading the dishes, and I grumble, "Am I the only one that knows how to load this thing in the morning?" Next, it's off to the laundry because there are 5 in my household now, and I have to do 2 loads a day in order to keep up with it. And actually, that laundry begins with picking up dirty clothes off of bathroom and bedroom floors in between occupancies of my family, and I'm whining to myself all the time about how the socks and the shirts are still inside out. I'm up at 6 a.m., but it's 8:20 before I can even think about getting in the shower. And honestly, it's really good stewardship of time. I get a lot done in that 2 hours and 20 minutes. Between all of that, I'm answering emails and text messages. I'm setting to-dos for our office. I'm listening to local and global news to stay abreast of current events. It really isn't a bad use of time in the morning. It's not bad stewardship of time, but I'm telling you, it is a bad breakfast diet. Feeding too much on the bread of complaints will lead to a flabby soul, fed on the junk food of resentment, washed down with the morning coffee of bitterness and self-absorption. So then all that I have left to share with others during the day is indignation, seasoned with irritation, displeasure, and disgruntlement. Notice how God had been absent all throughout that morning. It's the fast food kind of breakfast that makes us sick over time. It's surely not the breakfast of manna, God's good gifts given each day to give us what we need this day, our daily bread. Oh, and at least I forget. I think I'm complaining to myself so that I make sure that nobody else hears, because remember, I like being married and I don't want to ruin my kids' morning. Lest I forget who hears my complaining, Moses is reminding us here in verses 7 and 8, perhaps on behalf of my wife and kids and everyone else whom I will meet during the day. Moses says, "Who are we? You're not grumbling against us. You are grumbling against the Lord." And I begin to hear a corrective. You know, there are plenty of people who wish they had a household full of people to care for. There are plenty of people who wish they had clothes and dishes to wash and food to clean up from the night before and cars to shuffle and feet to stand on and life to live. The complaints we offer are not against the ones whom we think we are complaining against. They are ultimately complaints that fall upon the ears of the generous God who has given us everything we have and everything we need. And all we can give in return is complaints. Does it change our morning breakfast routine if we choose the bread of gratitude based on the one who has given us this day our daily bread? It's the kind of balanced diet that gets us ready for whatever the day may bring and gets us ready for those days where there's very, very little for us to be thankful for. The bread of gratitude wakes up in the morning and says, "As the sun rises to meet the day, O Lord, so too I rise to meet you." The bread of gratitude opens up our eyes and prays the prayer of the psalm that says, "Open my mouth, O Lord, and my lips shall proclaim your praise." It gets us ready for those days when it's difficult and we can be honest and say, "Oh God, today is not a good day. But you, O God, are good. And your word is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore." It's a steady and constant diet on the bread of gratitude puts us in a posture that is tall and strong and ready to meet the challenges of any day. Right? It's the posture of humility before the one who is the author of life. It's the posture of gratefulness to the giver of every good and perfect gift. It's the posture of graciousness for one who is filled with enough to give out praise to God, to share the dishes of mercy and kindness and heaping portions of graciousness and goodness, potent and strong enough to strengthen our bodies and souls for the sharing of and the working towards that one fine day when all will have enough manna from heaven, not too much and not too little, but just enough and more than enough. Listen, I know this is tough, right? Trust me, I know that the bread of complaint is so quick and easy to get your hands on it. And sometimes, man, that bread of complaint tastes so good going down. But the bread of complaint is the sausage biscuit every morning from McDonald's. It tastes good for now, but it will slowly kill us from the inside out. And there are some mornings, I'll be honest with you, that I need a little more manna than others. But a strong and healthy and holy life for us and for all people begins with the breakfast of champions, this holy manna from heaven, the feast upon the bread of gratitude. The other thing that I think we need to say about manna is that the gift of manna comes with it the requirement of work. God doesn't spoon feed the Israelites. Heck, God doesn't even prepackage it for them. God doesn't give them bread. God gives them the necessary ingredients for making bread. It's up to them to do the work, to recognize it, to collect it, to knead it, and to prepare it, and to enjoy it, and to share it. But it doesn't begin with them. Nothing we have, nothing we can do or not do begins with us. It begins with God, maker of heaven and earth, sustainer with every good and perfect gift. And the more disciplined to gratitude we can become, instead of saying, "What is this?" we can recognize the gifts of God that are right in front of us, given in quantities of all we need and more. The more trusting we can become in God's gracious presence and activity in our lives, the more empowered we become, not just to make it through the day, but to make of the day the very best in all that God desires for it. And the more like God we can become, strong to provide for others, fit to share abundantly as need arises, gracious to live fully, and to desire the fullness of life for all. Our stewardship begins, as does all life, with every new morning in the generosity of God. Our leading thought quote for our stewardship campaign this year on the generosity of God is from the theologian Walter Brueggemann, who says, "The only compelling motivation for generous stewardship is an awareness that life is pure gift and that gratitude is the only fitting posture for human life." It's not the only way to make it through a day, but it may be the only way to make of the day the richness and fullness of life that God made the day to be. I don't know if it's really the breakfast of champions, but a steady diet of the morning bread of gratitude, made from the freshest ingredients of the gifts from heaven. Not too much, not too little, so that we have enough to share. Will get you and I and the rest of this world through the wilderness journey, sharing and singing praise, standing tall and strong in a posture not contorted by our looking back or anxious with our looking forward, but surrounded with gifts, humble in gratitude, with enough to feed on and enough still to share. It's the only fitting posture for life, life abundant and life eternal, from the one who tells us, "I am the bread of life, Jesus Christ our Lord." Amen.